Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here. In this video, we've got a ton of news to cover. We're talking about Xbox, Launchbox, game boxes, Nintendo Switch, Vita3k, and a whole bunch more. Let's get started. Alright, we'll kick things off here talking about PlayStation Vita emulation on Android with Vita3k. So with Vita3k on Android releasing fairly soon, just in a number of weeks now, we've got a full list of everything that MacDo needs to get done before that APK is built. We've got improving touchscreen controls, improve the overlay gamepad and add a GUI for it, even adding custom driver selections for the GUI. And the last point here, I'm assuming Skyline might help out with a little bit. Understanding how to sign an APK. MacDo is pretty much on the home stretch now, and MacDo, if you are watching this, I wish you the best of luck and success moving forward. We're all excited about it. And speaking about exciting, next up we're talking about Xbox emulation on PC with Xemu or Xemu, or subscribe to Mr. Sujano. Anyways, version 0.7.83 just released, and it gets an exclusive full screen mode. Xemu is free, it's open source, it's an amazing emulator, and it is worth checking out. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. Next up, if you're a fan of Nintendogs and you've got a mobile device, you might be excited about this news. Nintendo looks like they're going to be releasing a version of Nintendogs for mobile. They have just filed a patent online. I'll leave a link to it in the description below in the event that you actually want to look through it. It does have Nintendogs on a mobile device. And speaking about mobile devices, next up we're talking about Anbernic, and it appears that Anbernic is getting ready to release a brand new handheld, the RG405M. It's metal, and it's also got the joystick on the top instead of the bottom, which might be a little bit more comfortable to use. It does feature the T618 chip. And on top of that, here's a prototype for a possible Anbernic Micro, something I'm not quite sure on how I feel about yet. The form factor is interesting. There are shoulder buttons on the top. I'm not quite sure where else you'd put them though. And the speaker on this looks like it would be easily covered by your thumb. This is just a prototype. Things might change. I'm curious to see what chip they'd have in it. Let me know your thoughts about this in the comments below. Yay or nay? Next up here, this is kind of crazy. I don't know if you've ever used Google before and searched for an article or some information only to click on an article that was written seemingly the same day you were searching. Once you click on that article, you realize the information is horribly outdated or inaccurate. That happens to me quite a bit. If this is true, this makes a ton of sense. CNET has been accused of secretly using an AI on articles and not disclosing that fact. And it gets worse. Apparently they use an AI to rewrite intros every 2 weeks or so because Google likes updated content. Eventually it gets so mangled that about every 4 months a real editor has to look at it and rewrite it. That is damning if true. I'll leave a link to this article in the description below if you want to read more about it. Wild. And speaking about wild, next up here we're talking about Arcade1Up and news that we had previously covered where they were accused of taking DuckStation source code and closing the source and using that DuckStation emulator in one of their Simpsons arcade cabinets. Well, it turns out it may in fact be true because Arcade1Up today on GitHub actually released the source code. So it appears they're actually trying to comply with the GPL licensing after possibly being called out about it by a whole bunch of different people in the emulation community and possibly in the arcade community. And they released this DuckStation code yesterday. It is DuckStation, it's hacked up to run Simpsons Bowling. Very interesting. And even more interesting is I know a couple of people who have tried to compile this code and it's failed to compile. So I don't know if they're doing something wrong or maybe it's released wrong. If you know how to compile this stuff or if you've compiled it, let me know in the comments below. I'm very curious about it. Next up here, if you're not a fan of arcade games, you might be a fan of Flash games. And if you are, you might be interested in Flashpoint. Flashpoint just released a brand new version on January 13th and I may have missed covering it. And if you haven't heard about Flashpoint before, it's very interesting. They've preserved over 78,000 games. If you are curious to learn more, I'll leave a link to this site in the description below. It appears they may have a file here that's a whopping 1.76 terabytes when extracted. and a lighter version of the file, which is 2.9 gigabytes when extracted. Huge. But moving on, and we're talking about emulation front end with Launchbox, and Launchbox version 13.1 has just released, and they've introduced some 3D jewel case models, making things look even better. These 3D boxes can be viewed in full screen, and you can now use big box as the Windows shell. On top of that, they've got some performance improvements, Amiga WHD load support, and also a bunch of bug fixes. If you haven't updated Launchbox, you might want to pick up 13.1. And next up here, we're still talking about boxes, 90s era game boxes. And this is more of just a fun fact than anything, and it's from Apogee Entertainment. I think I said that right. If you look at Apogee's 90 era boxes, you'll notice we always put the game name at the bottom. It was our first retail publisher, FormGen, who clued us in on this trick. When a game is on the shelf lower than your waist, you can't read the title if it's at the top of the box. And that kind of makes sense because the shelf kind of sticks out and you're not going to be able to see it when you look straight down at it. So this is more of just a fun fact than anything, and I'm kind of glad I know it. And last up here, but not least, we're talking about Skyline, specifically Skyline Edge, the paid early access testing build of Skyline. And this really isn't Skyline Edge per se, it's kind of Skyline Edge 24 with a few development hacks involved. Fellow YouTuber and someone who's part of the Skyline testing team may or may not have a Skyline Edge version 24 debug APK. It may have a sneak peek at some changes upcoming in Skyline Edge 25, or maybe it's just a debug version and that's it. Anyways, here I recommend checking out their YouTube channel, and this is the gameplay they just pulled. There's a tiny bit of screen tearing going on, or a lot of screen tearing going on, but at the same time here they're getting between 30 to 50 frames per second. That's pretty impressive. But anyways, that is all I've got for you in this one. Straight to the point, all stuff and no fluff. We talked about a lot today. Let me know your thoughts about absolutely any of it in the comments below. If you like this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button, check out my other videos. Don't tempt fate, save your state.